Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with the Monsters Attacked Glitched Out PBE Rundown. As we get ready and we've hit the mid-set, which means new champions come in, some champions go out, some new changes to the mechanics, and a bunch of new stuff to play as you get your rank reset and we head into the second half of Monsters Attack. So today I'm going to go over everything you'll see on PBE. Now keep in mind, for those of you that really like playing on PBE, balance will be off, there will be bugs, things we'll have to fix, of course, that's the point of PBE. But there should be a lot of new fun stuff for you to play and try out, and we can't wait for you to check it out. And so this video will go over what you can expect, so you don't go in necessarily fully blind and can help test things out as much as possible. Now before I start, the thing to remind you is, I am just presenting this material. I am just one piece of a very large TFT team that is working very hard to deliver all this content to you. So on behalf of the Set 8.5 pod, the rest of the team, and everyone else who's been working on this, thank you, and can't wait for you to try this. Remember, this is a bunch of people's work, not just mine. Gotta be clear on that. So, with that, let's jump in and talk about what you can expect. So, first off, it's time to say goodbye to a few champions. So 15 champions are leaving this time, and 2 traits. Civilian and Recon, so there will be no more Civilians, no more Recon. Personally, I'm pretty glad to see Recon gone. Champions-wise, I'm a little sad to see, Zoe leave. Zoe was a personal favorite of mine. Soraka, Zac, even Zed and Talia I kind of enjoyed. I think a lot of people will be sad to see Aphelios go. But, I think others might not be so sad to see, Yuumi, Vel'Koz maybe go away. Cho'Gath, I think, never really found his big, amazing, thing. He was never quite as good as Rammus. But yeah, so these 15 champions will be gone, and so you can kind of expect we're going to see about this many champions get added. So, what can you look forward to on the new champion side? Well, first off, let's talk about a few things that are changing just a bit. As we mentioned, no more Recon. So what does that mean for Ashe? Well, Ashe is now a sure shot. What does that mean for Vayne? Nothing. She lost Recon. Now, that's obviously going to make her weaker, so her spell's been buffed. There's also been other adjustments. Viego is now a Heart, which gives Heart a pretty interesting new line and a new carry. And so every time Viego gets a reset, he procs that Heart. That can be really cool. Janna is no longer a Civilian, but, still just as good and has that recent Spell Slinger buff that you saw in 13.5. So yeah, Janna looking a little bit better and hopefully more of a potential carry for that Spell Slinger in the endgame. On the trait side, Oxforce is still around, but has changed pretty dramatically. It still has the frustrating 1 second immunity, but it is now purely a tank trait. So we do expect you to play, that Annie Alistar frontline, or maybe the Fiora Alistar frontline. And it gives the Oxforce units a little extra armor and MR, nothing too crazy. So just more of a tank trait now than a damage trait and a full vertical. Sure Shot's also changed a little bit. Instead of it being a 2-4, it's now a 2-3-4-5, with a few new champions that we'll talk about later, and has had its power adjusted so that there's a little more in the champions, a little less in the trait. So definitely check that out. But if you were a Sure Shot player, at least you'll be able to play it a little differently instead of just playing Samira and Aphelios every game. So, yeah. Alright, LaserCorp has also been adjusted. There's a lot less LaserCorp champions this time, and now it's a 3-4-5-6. But what's interesting is at 5, it now gives your team the drones, not just the champions. So if you can go 5 LaserCorp and then go to level 8, you can do some pretty cool stuff with that. And in addition, it has a new carry to look forward to here, Warwick, who is an admin LaserCorp brawler. So a bunch of really cool lines. You can play that brawler with Renekton, get that in there. There's an admin line, really good with LeBlanc if you want to try to hacker him in. Warwick does some pretty good stuff in the back line, and so who knows, maybe Warwick is back. But Warwick is an AD champion with some built-in Omnivamp, and when he gets a takedown, he gets some attack speed. And his spell is a bunch of swipes that does a bunch of damage. And if it kills, he'll jump quickly to the next target. And if he ends up wasting a bunch of damage, he'll gain a bunch of mana back, allowing him to get back to casting. So he's definitely a killer this time. He's one of those champs, though, that, really needs items to do well. If you don't give him a bunch of items or a really good admin that gives him a bunch of AD or attack speed, he can get stuck on tanks. So not necessarily a free win, but definitely a cool melee brawler kind of champion. So check him out. Mech Prime has had a little bit of adjustment, nothing too crazy. The 3-piece and 5-piece have just a little bit less health. But in exchange, we've gotten rid of Set, who never really found his place other than just being a wall. And Set has been replaced with Garen. Garen has that really fun spell that we saw all the way back in Galaxies, where he has that knockdown, that AoE stun, and it's based off his AD damage. So as you can see here, you could build something like IE, Bloodthirster, Titans, and go that route. Or you can go the full tank route with like your Bramble, Redemption, and just get a bunch of CC, because it is a 1.5 second cast, or stun, on that cast there. So hopefully a more satisfying pinnacle of the mech comp than the slow windup of the mech set. So should be pretty cool. Two more other new champs that don't have, new traits here. Neeko is replacing Talia. Very similar champions, honestly, just very different spell outputs. And so you can see here, Neeko throws her frog that bounces 3 times, and on the 3rd bounce you get a big AoE explosion. So a little more clumpy, but still pretty similar, pretty fun. And then Gnar, who's an AD champion, already starts in his big Gnar form, but is a Gadgetean prankster, and so he's replacing Zoe, someone that you maybe want to use that Gadgetean Titan's Resolve or Bloodthirster on, as he really likes those AD items and gives Gadgetean an AD angle, so that it's not just a full AP composition. And yeah, in hand, the other cool thing is that Prankster has been changed so that if a melee Prankster unit procs it, it'll jump to the enemy backline. So he's very good at standing in the front, taking some damage, Prankstering to the back, and then starting to fight the backline with big AD damage. So give Gnar a try as well. 2 new threats. Morgana replaces Vel'Koz. Morgana shoots out 2 bindings that will stun targets for 1.5 seconds. And more importantly, any damage she does via auto attack, any damage whatsoever, her spell will apply Shred and Sunder. So if you're lacking a Last Whisper or a Static Shiv or an Ionic Spark, you can get Morgana, and she can help out in that department. And since she's a threat, she can work in any comp, and does pretty good with something like a Shojin to get that cast off repeatedly. If she's the final one in a fight, she can end up like 1v3ing with some pretty cool attack speed tricks. So yeah, definitely try Morgana out. And then Aatrox is replacing Zac. Turns out Aatrox is a big solo frontliner here. Scales very well with health. The first time he casts his spell, he's going to gain a bunch of extra health, 40% more. So that's pretty cool. Kind of like Renekton, but permanent. And then for the rest of the fight, every time he casts, he'll do a sword slam down that does a bunch of damage and then heals him. If you can get him a bunch of AP through something like, say, Admin or Heart, the heal also scales really well. And so he can become a real terror to deal with. So pretty cool tank to throw into any comp if you're lacking frontline. Much like Zac, but very different output and scales a lot better with health and AP than I think Zac did. Alright. Some new traits. Quickdraw. You'll see some familiar champions here, like Misfortune, Kai'Sa, and Ezreal, have now got a new trait called Quickdraw, and then Lucian we'll talk about a little later. And the way this works is pretty simple. After every 2 damaging ability projectiles, Quickdraw will fire a bonus ability projectile, dealing even more damage. So basically you can look at it as it's a damage amp for their spells. Pretty good on Ezreal and Misfortune especially. If you're running that 3-piece, it basically gives them 50% more spell damage, which is not bad. So definitely check that out. And again, it's a way to kind of give Kai'Sa something other than Recon. Misfortune's got some new angles. And then Ezreal we'll talk about a little later. But yeah, some pretty cool stuff there. All right, Riftwalker. This is a really interesting trait. I'll be honest with you. We'll see how it goes on PBE. But all it really does is it just has a 3-piece. So each of these champions are uniquely powerful because their trait doesn't really amp them up. You've got Pyke, kind of a reprint, but much more damage-based than utility, where he'll stab somebody and then slide and stab again, and that slide will do the stun. Vex, if you liked blue buff Zoe, Vex will be your blue buff user. repeatedly shooting her spell, and every third spell is a much bigger one that passes through targets. And then Jhin, that 4-cost Jhin, same thing. AD item user, his attack speed is locked in. The 4th shot will do some big damage and go through targets. So if you like that Jhin kind of damage, it gives you another AD line that isn't sure shot, which is nice. And so this is a 3-piece trait. In addition, you'll see some changes to the traits that they're attached to. Hacker, very similar, but one big change here is that if you have 3 or 4 Hacker, you can actually choose to give some of that Omnivamp to the rider. So let's say, for example, you want to put in a Warwick and a Hacker, you can give him 10% Omnivamp. Now, if a Hacker is in the horse, they get the full 40 or 60%, but it gives you an option if you want to try to give some of that Omnivamp to someone else. And then Renegade, as you can see here, Jhin is a Renegade, which gives Renegade a ranged carry, which is pretty cool. Jhin Viego, I imagine we're going to see a lot of Jhin Viego, in-game dual carries. But you can run it as a 3-5-7 now, which is pretty cool. It gives you different breakpoints, and it's not just literally 3 or 6. So, should be fun, and makes the emblem pretty exciting as well. Now, what does Riftwalker actually do, though? You'll see here it says Summon Zac. Well, the way it works is as soon as you put the 3-piece trait in, Zac is back. Zac is not a buyable champion, but he joins your team. But the interesting thing about Zac is whichever Riftwalker he's closest to, he gets that trait. So for example, if you put him next to Vex, you get a mascot. If you put him next to Jhin, you get a Renegade. And if you put him next to a Pyke, you get a Hacker. And you can see right here, he puts him next to the Pyke, and that's 2 Hacker, and now they have the Hecarim. So pretty cool trait. And yes, there is a Riftwalker emblem, so you can do some pretty crazy things with this. That's the thing I think we're going to keep an eye on and see how that goes. But yeah, and so Zac scales up with the star level of the Riftwalkers. He doesn't have his break apart that he did before, but just +1 unit is pretty powerful from a trait and can do some pretty cool stuff with that. So yeah, definitely check it out. And like I said, I think Jhin and Vex will both be very popular. All right, and then our big vertical this time, Infiniteam. Travelers from the future. They're here to save the day in, glitched out. And so the way these work, 6 new champions here. Lucian, Pantheon. Pantheon's pretty cool in that he scales his damage with magic resist. So pretty cool magic resist tank and gives Heart an early game option. You'll notice Sivir is back, but no longer a civilian. Her spell is very similar in that she throws her big boomerang, but instead of it breaking apart and healing, now it breaks apart and does damage. And so it'll split into 3 smaller shots, do some extra damage, which is pretty cool. Shen is a very powerful tank. He can actually absorb the damage from somebody else on his team. He'll pick somebody far away and absorb the damage from them while reducing it. So very good at protecting allies. I imagine Shen is going to be really popular. And then TF and Ultimate Ezreal, which we'll talk about in a second. But yes, for the first time in TFT, the same champion, Ezreal, is actually in 2 different spots here. So pretty neat here. So what does Infiniteam do? Well, when you have 3 Infiniteam, you will see a portal on your map. Technically, you can get up to 2 portals. And whichever Infiniteam champion is in that portal, at the start of combat, an alternate timeline version of them will come out with items. Different items. Completely different items here. The number of items is tied to how many augments you have. So the later in the game, the more items they'll have. But for example, here you can see it's 2-2. The Pantheon has been cloned and summons a clone with less HP, but a Sunfire. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, late game, you can run like 5 Infiniteam, clone 2 people, and they'll each get 3 items. It makes your boards look really crazy because you get like these bonus 3 item champions. But again, they do reduced damage and have reduced health. So they're not that crazy, but still pretty fun. And the other thing to note here is that the spatula plus sword recipe has been changed to Infiniteam. So if you want to make like an Infiniteam Morgana and then start cloning Morganas, that's pretty cool. Especially because CC is not reduced. So if you get one of these emblems, CC champions are very good to clone. So check that out. But yeah, pretty interesting trait here. And then their premier carries, Twisted Fate is one of the ones I think is the most fun. We have a Ginsu's Spellslinger Duelist Infiniteam here. I love this champion. As you can see here, you get those Ginsus stacked. And the way it works is when he starts casting his spell, for 2.5 seconds, every auto attack will draw a card. So you want a lot of attack speed to draw more cards. And then at the end, for every card you've drawn, you'll throw them out rapidly, and that's what these blue cards are. Finalized by one red card at the end that does a big AoE explosion. And the nice thing is the spell itself will trigger Ginsu's. So you can see here as you watch the GIF, Ginsu's just stacks up more and more and more, and you get throwing it, and it feels really fun here. So try a build like this with, Ginsu, Shiv, Jeweled Gauntlet. Yeah, it can be pretty fun. And then our new 5-cost, Ultimate Ezreal. So Ultimate Ezreal's spell is he summons 5 versions of different timelines, and they all shoot their ult and do a bunch of damage, which is pretty cool. But for the first time, as I said, we've got parallel universes going on here. Ultimate Ezreal and Ezreal, 2 different Ezreals from different timelines, and if you play them together, they help each other. So if you play them together, Ultimate Ezreal will gain one more alternate timeline version when he shoots his ult. So it basically makes his ult like 20% more powerful. But base Ezreal gets a big boost. His spell completely changes to an Ezreal ult. Now it does less damage, but it does that, attack speed slow and hits the entire backline. And so it's pretty cool to run Ezreal and Ultimate Ezreal together. I really think an underground, play the Ezreal and then cash out and then run the Samira plus the Ultimate Ezreal, keep the Ezreal around. There's some pretty cool builds you can do there. And it's a great way to close off a comp for the first time with 2 Ezreals on the team. So check that out, and that is our premier 5-cost this set. So, all right, some other trait changes. Nothing too big here, but did want to call out 2 other things you should be aware of. Defender no longer has a built-in taunt. We've removed that. It causes more bugs and more issues. We just want the behavior to kind of play off the normal behavior, so look forward to that. They'll still be tanky, but you'll want to position around the fact they don't have a taunt. And then admin. We definitely saw near the end of the set. This trait, look, it's a complicated trait. There's a lot to balance here. So we did a balance pass, especially because with Soraka gone and being replaced with Warwick, things like on cast got a lot worse, while things like on ally death we've seen be too good for a long time. So we did a big balance pass here. You can take a look at this. We're going to continue to keep a very close eye onto this on PBE, but the goal here was to really try to balance more around Warwick and get admin into a healthier spot. Still with high rolls, but a little less dead options. So for example, you can see we removed a lot of the gain mana, because most of the time people weren't really interested in that. We've enabled on-cast gain AD, so that Warwick can really take advantage of that. So yeah, check it out and let us know what you think. All right. Mechanics changes. We've got one big quality of life change I want to talk about right away, and this is permanent. This is not just part of glitched out. This is a permanent feature. Now when you take something off the carousel, the item pops off. This has been a long time coming. This happens at every stage of the game. So even if you had 2 Pantheons and you would have got a third and it would have made Thieves' Gloves, nope. The glove will pop off first and then they'll merge. So you no longer have to worry about taking the wrong thing and having the item, get messed up. You can now take it safely. You see a Samira with a belt and you're like, oh, but I don't want that belt stuck on her. Don't worry, that's not happening anymore. So this should make the carousel a lot easier to digest, a lot more approachable, and long-term, we think healthier for TFT. Like I said, this has been a long time coming, so thank you for that. Now, with this change, that allows us to introduce our mechanic into Glitched Out, which is Glitched Out Carousels. Stage 2, the carousel will always be glitched out. Something weird will happen on the carousel. For example, you can see on this carousel, everyone gets a duplicator. Also, that's weird. So yeah, stage 2 carousel, always glitched out, 100% of the time. Stage 3, 4, 5, and 6, chance to be glitched out. Now, it's set so you're never going to see 5 glitched out carousels, but basically the odds are it might be a 2 and 4 game or a 2, 3, 5 game. Never more than 3 glitched out carousels in a game, but check these out, and there's some pretty interesting variations here. I don't want to spoil them all, but to give you a taste, you see the one here where everyone has a champ duplicator. You can see the one on the left here where you get 2 item components, and these can be a real mind bend because you're like, oh crap, do I want the rod with the sword or the rod with the bow? and then the champion also, and you start having to do a little bit more thinking because they have multiple items on them. Or some of the sillier ones, and again, I don't want to spoil them all, but as you can see on the right here, there's just item component anvils, and they each have an item on them. So they're just walking anvils, and it's really funny because they move around and look pretty cool. But yeah, so like I said, there's some glitched out carousels, and again, not spoiling them all, but check them out, and they should add some fun variations to the game. And don't worry, we've learned from past mistakes in Galaxies. There's no like full item only carousels. If you're going into a carousel in last place going, man, I really need that glove, the odds are still the same. We kept the base the same. So nothing changed there. It's always a layer on top of the carousel. So don't think we've, messed up competitive integrity here. It's just a layer on top that should be a lot of fun. All right, moving on. Hero augments. They're obviously still there. They're a part of the set. But we've had, to make some new hero augments here, as well as we went back and kind of adjusted some of the ones that really just never worked throughout the set. So you can take a look here. I'm not going to read them all here, but again, every champion has a carry and support. But there's some pretty fun ones here. I'll call out like Lucian here. Gain a Lucian the first time your strongest Lucian casts his ability each combat, and every 2 times afterwards, gain 1 experience point. So you can get like a blue buff Lucian and start using him to try to power level, which is pretty fun. Or Sivir. Sivir had both of hers adjusted. She's a different champion. And her carry now is at the start of combat player rounds, gain a gold for every 45 attack damage your strongest Sivir has. So you got some Death Blades lying around, make some more gold. Pretty cool. And then, yeah, as you can see here, Fiora got both of hers slightly reworked. Her carry one is very different. Every 4th attack on the same champion deals 15% of her magic health, or her max health, as magic damage, and then heals Fiora for the same amount. So you can get some extra big damage on a tanky Fiora. Or Vitality of the Ox, which is actually the same output, but it's every 10 attacks now. So you get this really satisfying chunky heal instead of this really invisible tiny heal. So we just think that has better pacing. Yasuo carry is a bit different. Annie carry is now different, where her spell is larger and can stun. So operates as a decent frontline and good CC there. So, like I said, a lot of augments. Check them out. 3 costs, same thing. Got some new stuff for Gnar, Morgana, and Shen and Vex. But then in addition, Alistar, we went ahead and changed Alistar's augment so where his carry augment is a combination of his old carry and support augment. So hopefully that's exciting. Behemoth Alistar still really cool. And then his support augment is actually a support augment where at the start of combat he will 50% shred. So if you're lacking, that Ionic Spark, you can grab an Alistar and that'll help your team. So pretty cool. You don't need to put an Ionic Spark on your Viego if you've got an Alistar support, as an example. Jack's support has also been changed. The dodge was a little too binary. So now it's armor and attack speed that doubles when Jax dies. Really good in a mech comp where you're just letting the Jax instantly die to the mech. So pretty cool there. And then Kai'Sa support, same thing. Kind of gives your champion, 2 nearby champions, that old recon feel where their spells can crit and they gain some critical strike chance. So again, trying to make some of the less fun augments actually be, something you want to take. 4 costs. This is where a lot of the work was done. There's a lot of different 4 costs here. Some of these are really interesting because they transform the tanks into carries and things like that. For example, Aatrox carry, who again is a tank, now his abilities deal additional damage equal to 12% of his max health. So you can make him a really cool tank with something like, Warmog's BT Titans, which can be pretty cool. Garen carries another really cool one where his ability costs 40 less mana and deals additional damage equal to 80% of his AD, but it no longer stuns. And so you can trade off that stun and make the Garen mech damage dealer you've always wanted. So that's pretty cool. Meanwhile, things like Jhin carry, which is rule of 4, every 4 enemies he kills each combat, he drops 7 gold. He'll occasionally drop an item component. This one's tricky though, because the every 4 enemies doesn't carry over right now, so you have to get the 4 kills each combat. But if you have, a Jhin carry for real, you can farm a lot of cool stuff with him. So that one's pretty neat. Twisted Fate, every 10 cards thrown, your strongest Twisted Fate drops a gold. Again, get that Ginsu's Twisted Fate going, that's fun. And then finally, I want to cover Warwick, who has Well-Fed and Well-Fed Plus. This is one of those things that honestly we should have done with Misfortune, but we're doing it with Warwick, where if you get this augment at 3-2, the balance is different than if you get the augment at 4-2. They take the time to stack. And so the way it works is every time your strongest Warwick attacks, you gain a stack, and this gives your whole team health. So if you get a Warwick going, you can give your team a lot of health. But again, the difference between 3-2 and 4-2 was too great, so we had to fix that. And then finally, Echo Carry Augment has been changed. Hopefully this can make some cool Echo Carry builds, because this is another one that never really took off. Finally, 5 cost, Ultimate Ezreal obviously gets his augments. Fiddlesticks gets a new carry augment where 6 seconds into combat, no matter what, if he's still dormant, he'll cast. So this means you can safely put him on the back line and still have him cast. And he'll continue absorbing corrupted souls as the fight goes on. One of the things about Fiddlesticks right now when you frontline him is once he goes, he no longer absorbs souls. So this should be a pretty big buff to an actual Fiddle carry. And then Syndra carry, another champion that just got buffed last patch, but still kind of struggling a bit. But this carry augment now gives her 30 starting mana and 10% attack speed whenever an allied champion dies. So she can keep throwing things in, getting more attack speed, throwing more things in, and getting that extra damage. And so hopefully that should be fun for Syndra. So there you go, a bunch of new hero augments to play with. Again, we'll keep a close eye on the balance. But yep, hero augments for monsters attack still, finishing a thing. To end us up here, a couple changes to the other modes. Double up. Obviously, funneling has been a thing, so for the second half of Monsters Attack, we're going to make one pretty big change here, which is that items now pop off of units before the unit is sent to your partner. No more sending all your items over to one player to funnel them. You have to play around the items you hit. Items are currently not transferable. You can still transfer champions and help each other out there, but you've got to play around the items you hit. So definitely need to be strategic about that. But in exchange, the Lesser Rune of Allegiance now regenerates itself 2 rounds after you use it. So you're encouraged to use it pretty frequently because it'll come back. And then after 4-1, the next time you use it, it will upgrade to a permanent Rune of Allegiance, but then will take 4 rounds to transfer over. So again, sharing units, more encouraged, but you can't share items as much. And then some adjustments to the gift armories, where now we offer an additional gift of the highest tier so that there's actually some more interesting choices. And the chance of seeing the highest tier of gifts has been reduced just a little bit. So gift armory should stay interesting and have a cool new thing. And then finally in Hyper Roll, so that Hyper Roll players can also enjoy the glitched carousel mid-set mechanic, they will occasionally have carousels added on top, but they'll take half as long. The way it works is 8th, 7th, 6th, and 5th will all be released at the same time, and then 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st will all be released, and then it'll be over. Because again, Hyper Roll is meant to be fast, and carousels can take a lot of time. But we want you to be able to enjoy those glitched out carousels. So look forward to that. Lastly, just some fun stuff to show you here. The new Chibi is going to be Chibi Zed, so you can get base Chibi Zed. And then if you get lucky, you can get the Project Chibi Zed complete with Finisher. Pretty sweet finisher, as you can see here. Destroys that little legend, all Project Zed style. Pretty badass if you're a Zed fan. So if you miss Zed from the first half of Monsters Attack, here you go. And then there's a bunch of other really cool cosmetics. I know there's some that people are going to be looking forward to here. Shork, I think, will be a pretty big popular one. We have a buffed out Scuttle Crab. There's the Rangos. So if you're a Dango fan, there's that. And then the Evil River Sprite, part of the Battle Pass. And so, yeah. And then our big villain here, the Evil Whiskers. That's the Mythic. So, pretty cool. Lots of cosmetics to check out, so give them a try on PBE, let us know what you think, and hopefully there's some cool ones that maybe become your new favorite. And there you go. That's what you can expect in the mid-set. It's a mid-set, it's not a full set, but there's a lot of cool stuff to check out, a lot of new ways to play, new combinations, and 2 whole Ezreals to play with. So yeah, give it a try. And as always, PBE will go up Tuesday afternoon, give or take. That's Pacific time, so don't ask me when it comes up. It'll come up when it's ready. And give it a try. We'll be doing adjustments as we go until it goes live. Definitely let us know if you think anything feels weird, any bad balance, any bugs, because we'll be using the next 2 weeks to really make sure it's polished before it goes live. So, yeah. All right, well, thank you very much, and hopefully you guys have fun as we enter another half set. Can't wait for you to try it, and TFT continues on with a bunch of new content. So, yeah. All right. On behalf of the entire team that worked their butts off to deliver this to you, thank you. Enjoy. And we can't wait for you to play. Until next time, take it easy.